Good morning. So before I begin my remarks, as I was preparing for today, I discovered that this story is one of the longest stories of all the Gospels. I think Ron is getting back to me, but I don't know. But anyway, we won't go there. But there is a lot to unpack. And so that we will not be here until Jacob comes and the Dinkas join us, I have just chosen to focus on 3 topics. So I want to talk a little bit about breaking social and religious barriers in terms of how we reach out to others. We'll talk about a little bit about the living waters. And finally, we'll talk about the power of a testimony and looking at evangelism. So here we go. And I have a lot of stuff today. So last Sunday evening, I was in sci-fi heaven. Several Star Trek movies were being shown, and as I drifted off to sleep, I started thinking about the world that Gene Roddenberry envisioned. He envisioned a world where money was no longer exchanged, where people or beings from different planets didn't look like us, but they lived and worked together in harmony. Then I thought of Dr. Martin Luther King. He dreamed of a nation where all men are created equal, and where there will come a time when we will all sit down together at the table of brotherhood, and finally, where they will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And then there was another man, Jesus. He too had a similar dream as well. Now, our gospel tells the story of a woman at the well and how people were shocked by Jesus' actions. It was hard for them to understand why Jesus was talking to a Samaritan woman. The Samaritans were considered half-breeds. They were ostracized because their distant relatives intermingled with Gentiles from Samaria after they returned from exile, even though they were commanded not to do so. Not only was this woman a Samaritan, she lived in sin. And aside from that, Jesus spoke to her in a public space. No Jewish man, no rabbi would consider talking to a woman in public under these circumstances, not even if they were married. But Jesus didn't care about societal norms. He showed her love from the bottom of her heart. Now, this woman was a member of the hated mixed race, known to be living in sin, and was in a public place in broad daylight. Now, the time of the day is important because I believe she chose that time because it was during the noon hour, so as not to run into so many people. No respectable Jewish man would be caught speaking to her, but Jesus did. He shared a message about fresh and pure water that would quench her spiritual thirst forever. Now, what is significant about this story is that it shows this Jesus speaks to people where they are at. The good news is for every person, no matter their race, social position, ethnicity, or past sins. Our charge, then, is to share the good news with others at any time and in any place. Jesus crossed barriers to share the good news, and those who follow Jesus, we are asked to do the same. Now, Jesus went on to say, if you only knew the gift God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me, and I would give you the living water." The woman took these words at first literally and said, "You don't have a rope? You don't have a bucket? Where would you get this living water?" But Jesus was talking about spiritual thirst and spiritual hunger. It was here where Jesus was claiming to be the Messiah, and only the Messiah could give this gift that satisfies the soul. Just as our bodies experience hunger and thirst, so do our souls. The woman had confused the two, and it may have been because no one had ever spoken to her in such a manner. Now, one of my resources that I always love to work from, is the Life Application Bible. And it asked the question, we would never deprive our bodies of food and water when they are hungry, so why would we deprive our souls? The living word represents Christ, and the written word represents the Bible. Now, these are the tools that represent the living water. Now, I really like this next section of their encounter because it does show how Jesus reached beyond tribes and gender in order to reach someone. He shows that he didn't care about her past. There was no judgment on how she had lived her life. There was no commendation. There was only care. It shows that even though you may not live a perfect life, there is perfect love from God. As I am sure you've heard me say many times when talking about judgment and judging others, that only perfect resides in heaven. Now, Jesus talks about that Jerusalem is not the only place of worship. Again, it doesn't matter. His reply to her was, it doesn't matter where you worship the Father, on this mountain or in Jerusalem. The location of worship is not as important as the attitude of the worshipers. You never know when an opportunity will present itself to witness to others and lead them to Christ. We see this happen when, after meeting Jesus, she leaves the water jug behind and goes to tell others about her experiences. But she did it in such a way that would cause them to listen and believe her statement. Although she realized she had just met the Messiah, but she knew because of her reputation, she just couldn't blurt it out. She couldn't just talk about who this man truly was. She phrased it in more of a question to arouse curiosity. It is at this moment she now becomes an evangelist, sharing her testimony. It can be a small gesture inviting others to seek and experience God for themselves. Come and see a man who told me everything that I did. Could he possibly be the Messiah? The townspeople moved from believing because of the word to believing because they had heard for themselves. They begged him to stay in their village, and so he did for 2 days, so that more could hear his message and believe. There we go. I told you I had lots of different props today. Now we know that he is indeed the Savior of the world. So why is this message important now, during this season of Lent? And what could it possibly have to do with a man who wrote science fiction and another who dreamed of a better future for his children and a nation? Like Christ, they were dreamers. They looked beyond borders. They looked beyond color and ethnicity. Lent is about reflection, changing habits, and the spiritual preparation for Easter. Strictly speaking, it's a season of prayer, fasting, and giving alms. I came across a definition which put it another way. We are called not only to abstain from luxuries during Lent, but to a truer inner conversation of the heart, transformational change, as we seek to follow Christ more faithfully. Now, my spiritual partner last week sent me this list about, do you want to fast this Lent? And I think what is happening now is we are looking at Lent in a different way. It truly is not about just giving up, although, I still think about giving up chocolate and jelly beans. But does that really cause a transformational change in me? Does that really bring me closer to Christ? So I just want to share a few things that she sent me. She said, fast from hurting words and say kind words. Fast from sadness and be filled with gladness. Fast from pessimism and be filled with hope. And I think that's one we need to write across our foreheads right now. And then towards the end, it talks about fast from bitterness and fill your hearts with joy. Fast from words and be silent so you can listen. So that's what I believe Jean, Martin, and Christ have in common. All three dreamed and believed in a better tomorrow, a better us. People and a world that look beyond outward appearances to see the beauty that lies within all of us, to reach beyond borders and to meet people where they are. Now, in the Jewish faith, there is a tradition called mitzvot. It's about what good deed or kindness that you have done for someone. And maybe that's all it takes to shape a world we want to live in, a little more kindness. Have a blessed day.